We come now to public input. First of all, there is a declined request from a representative of the organisation All Aboard. That is declined under Standing Order 7.7.2 on the basis that that is a matter more appropriate to go to the Planning and Environment and Climate Change Committees. So the person has been referred accordingly and will attend, I think, in the new year. We have an approved request from the Northern Action Group in relation to item 10 on the agenda. So if Bill Foster is here, Bill, if you'd like to come forward. Are you on your own today? Sorry? Are you on your own today? Yep. Well, welcome, Bill. Merry Christmas to you. Thank you for coming down all the way from Wellsford, I think.
Well, from Warkworth.
Warkworth, okay, well that's a terrible mistake to make. And you'll know the normal procedure. There is 5 minutes for you to make your presentation. There's a chance for up to 3 councillors to ask questions. There won't be any comment or debate in this session. That will be reserved for item 10, and you're very welcome to stay for item 10. So welcome, Bill, and you may begin your presentation.
Mr Mayor and councillors, thank you very much for allowing me to speak briefly in support of the motion from Councillor Sayers and his colleagues. And let me also acknowledge the staff report, which is complimentary about our submission, but reasonably enough asks you to consider whether now is the right time for a representation review. NAG is supporting this proposal now because we believe it's the right thing to do and that now is the right time. The current situation is that Rodney is unique amongst all local board areas. 64% of the population is rural or lives in rural settlements. As we point out on page 5 of our submission, the needs and wants of people in small urban areas for local government services are different from those of people in rural areas. The Kaipara Harbour is also a specific feature of Rodney, and split representation regarding land, environment and Maori interests has been an ongoing issue. The result at the moment is our representation is currently non-complying, unequal and unbalanced. In our proposal, which you'll have seen, I won't go through it, a feature of this is that it also creates a real opportunity for Maori representation within the existing legal framework by allowing iwi to nominate or support one or more candidates for the substantially rural subdivision proposed. And let me add here generally that I doubt that this approach that we're proposing for Rodney applies in any other local board area, even in Franklin, which is also rural, because that would require recognition of non-contiguous subdivisions. That means areas which aren't together, and that's never been considered to date in structuring representation groups. The benefits of our proposal, I submit, are significant. Common rural service level interests will have unified representation, and small urban service level interests will be consolidated and focused. It minimises changes and keeps the existing boundaries as much as possible. We suggest leaving Dairy Flat unchanged, but it could be considered rural because it is a rural area. And the Maori guardianship role over rural Rodney gets recognised. A single subdivision representation of Kaipara Harbour is proposed. And the result of our proposal would be representation is complying, equal and balanced. I doubt any of you would probably have a problem with this proposal being considered as a suitable initial proposal for the next representation review. So the question is, why do this now rather than wait until the next review is required? Well, you have a primary responsibility as the governing body to ensure that the representation basis for each and every election is fair, balanced and as equal as possible. An opportunity to improve that basis from new thinking is not something that ever may be or should be deferred. Also, Council currently faces a major communications and public relations challenge in consulting on unpleasant decisions to deal with a crisis revenue shortfall. At a time like this, I would think the opportunity to offer ratepayers, through a representation review, an exercise in democratic decision-making and accountability to the people who are being asked to bear the financial burden would be a welcome overlay, not to say a diversion from, inevitable criticisms of governance, management, accountability and performance. A review now will show during a time of difficulty that Auckland Council always puts people first. For the people of Rodney, this really does matter. There have been some negative comments which have surfaced from our proposal. I'd just like to say firstly that we are not here to praise or criticise any of our elected representatives or the outcome from their decisions. That's not the substance of this proposal. It's about the basis of representation, not performance or outcomes. Also, future uncertainty is not a reason to defer anything. Speculation and uncertainty may substantially reduce or confuse the quality of information available to make good decisions today, but they are never reasons to delay making good decisions. Proceeding with the representation review now with a proposal for only limited changes at minimal cost may allow you to defer the next full review as long as till 2028. That would be well after the disruptions from COVID and major decisions currently facing Auckland and local government in general in New Zealand have been made, and when the light at the end of the tunnel makes their implications more clear. So NAG asks you to support Councillor Sayer's motion and proceed now with a focused representation review. Thank you, Mr Mayor and councillors, for the opportunity, and Merry Christmas.
Thank you very much, Bill. I'll close off the question list now because I've already got 5 questioners, so can you please be precise in your questions so we can maybe get through 5 on this. The first question is from Councillor Wayne Walker.
Thanks, Bill. How would you be proposing that input be received from the local board, for example, and the IMSB? Obviously, they're not here because they're not on the governing body. And do you anticipate any issues around that?
I don't think there are any issues there. I would just say at the outset that one of the reasons for not engaging the local board in the proposal initially is that, firstly, the governing body is responsible for representation issues, not the local boards, and that clearly local board members in Rodney would have a conflict of interest in that their representation and their election currently depends on the basis of representation on which they were elected. So the right time for them to contribute as individuals, because I don't think the board can actually form a view on this issue, but the right time would be when the initial review proposal is put out. The same would obviously be true for the Independent Maori Statutory Board, which I think needs time, as always, to consider these issues, and the best way to get their input is obviously to proceed with the review proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Daniel Newman.
Good morning. Good morning, Bill. I've got one question. Should an elector in a rural subdivision in North Rodney have guaranteed franchise to elect a minority of members to the Rodney Local Board, or should that elector receive a ballot paper to elect all members to the Rodney Local Board?
I think if you're talking about the rural subdivision, this is a situation where people can choose any of or all of the electors. I mean, these are also details that can be dealt with in responses to the review proposal, but essentially the aim of this proposal is to get the maximum amount of representative basis for people's votes and choices.
Within a subdivision and not at large?
Within the subdivision, yes. So there's an at-large within a subdivision, as we have now, where there's more than one candidate within the subdivision, and we would persist with that approach.
Thank you. Councillor Shane Henderson.
Thank you. Just 2 quick questions. So community of interest is really where the legal test is on ward boundaries. As a very regular visitor to Western Rodney, do you feel that Western Rodney shares communities of interest with Eastern Rodney?
I think it does in terms of the commonality of the guardianship from the Maori perspective. I mean, that's why we presented in front of the Representation Commission on the alignment of boundaries for the then proposed Helensville electorate, which is now Kaipara-Mahurangi, and the argument for alignment was well accepted. But the concept was that this is both East and West Kaipara. Kaipara and Maharangi have a common heritage, and it's appropriate for both of them to remain as part of that heritage within Rodney, but subdivided as we propose.
Thanks. Sorry, just a quick supplementary, if that's okay. Oh, I'm getting the glare. Oh, sorry, Mayor. Just quickly, Kumi's facing large intensification in the future. I just want your view on timing. Why should we do this now rather than wait for intensification to come and get a better picture of population?
Well, the first response to that is you can always wait for anything if you can put it off, and you don't have to make the decision now. But as I said, your responsibility to do something which is good for the people in terms of giving them democratic accountability through the whole representation process, which is the basis on which we elect our representatives, that should never be delayed. It should always be done when you can improve that, and as quickly as possible. And the other reasons I've outlined for why there will be advantages to you from proceeding with this proposal right now when you're going through a period of unprecedented impact from the outcome of COVID and the response to it. And this really gives you an opportunity to let people exercise their one democratic right, which is to help you decide the best basis for their representation.
Thank you. Councillor Chris Fletcher.
Thank you. You've addressed the issue of why now, rather than waiting for 2025. Yes. But is there a groundswell of support for this? Can you speak to where the support for such a consultation is being generated from?
The short answer to that is there's never a groundswell of support for these things. As you know, the turnout for elections is generally low. We are hoping that by engaging the community through this proposal, particularly the rural communities, we'll get a better turnout in Rodney. And so no, there's no groundswell, there never is in the representation reviews. That's why you are tasked with the responsibility of proposing the appropriate structure and basis for representation, getting the feedback from people who care to comment, and then making the decision, ultimately with the Local Government Commission if necessary. So there's never a groundswell of support for these kind of changes. Most people don't either have the time or the understanding or the knowledge to even comment effectively on them until they've had the proposal presented, which is what the review process does.
Thank you. Councillor John Watson, last question.
Thanks, Bill. Just a very a quick question here, and just really goes to why this proposal was not raised earlier in the year when Council was looking at the options in February. Could you give a response to that?
Yeah, okay. The Representation Commission that we submitted to was only dealing with those issues at the end of 2019, and our submission to them was in February this year. Nobody ever considered the idea of having interest-based subdivision representation rather than place-based representation because nobody had ever thought of the idea. It's only come up in the context of our consideration following discussion about boundary changes, about alignment, and seeing the opportunities with the work that NZ Stats has done in creating these rural-urban distinctions, their own classification. People weren't aware of this, and it's never been a factor in the consideration before. So we're pleased to be able to get onto it as quickly as we can. And of course, in February, that was very early in the process.
Thank you very much. Councillor Sayers, I might ask you to move the motion to receive and to thank Bill and the Northern Action Group for their submission, seconded by Councillor John Watson. I'll put that resolution. All those in favour, please say aye. To the contrary, no. Carried. Thank you very much, Bill, for your presentation and answering the questions.
I appreciate the opportunity.
Right, we come now to item number 7, which is local board input.